Okay, welcome everyone back to our conference on celebrating and honoring the 40th anniversary of the East Los Angeles student walkouts and blowouts. And now we're going to turn to our panel presentation composed of the former students and both high school and college students who participated in the walkouts. And each of them will talk a little bit about their recollections and their reflections on what happened 40 years ago. So I've introduced all of them earlier, and we're going to go one by one. Each one of them will say a few words, and then we'll go to the others, and hopefully we'll still have some time for to ask questions from the audience. So the order we're going to go with is the order that I introduced them earlier: Bobby Verdugo, Mita, Harry Gamboa, Henry Gutierrez, Vicki Castro, and Yoli Rios. So I want to turn now to Bobby Verdugo, and he'll share his recollections and his memories of that event. But before I turn to Bobby, I want to point out that one of the panel participants couldn't be with us today, Paula Crisostomo. Paula was a student at Lincoln High School at the time of the blowouts, and she went on to graduate from UCLA, and she's now the Director of Government and Community Relations at Occidental College. And she couldn't be with us today due to some medical issues, so we wish her our best and hope to see her again here at UCSB. So I want to now turn to Bobby Verdugo, who was also a student at Lincoln High School. He went on to college at Cal State Los Angeles, and now he's the Youth Services Lead Coordinator of the Bienvenidos Family Services and the National Latino Fatherhood and Family Institute at the Calmecac Youth Center in Los Angeles. So, Bobby, we'll turn to you now.
Well, thank you, Mario. Hello, everybody. Come on, let's. We, you know, it's such an honor to be here. I know we were talking earlier about, you know, the history, and you know, of course, we're going to talk about the walkouts. But this campus here has a huge history in terms of what Mecha became, you know, because it was here where Mecha was born. You know, the Plan de Santa Barbara, which was in 1969, was when UMAS, formerly United Mexican American Students, became Mecha. So, you know, that was exciting times. And yes, I did graduate from Cal State LA, but you know, I was a student at Lincoln. I was a senior at there during the walkouts. I did not graduate. I was a dropout. So you know, oh, Bobby, yeah. But yeah, you know, it's just a lot of things. And you know, Harry and I, we go back a long ways, and we were talking about just why things happen. And you know, if you saw the movie and you saw how the Bobby character, you know, that was portrayed so cutely by Efren Ramirez, you know, Pedro from Napoleon Dynamite. You know, there was that one scene where they asked him about going to school, and he goes, you know, what for? I mean, you know, what's the point? And you know, that really was my attitude at that time. I was, you know, probably carrying a 1.2 maybe. I think I beat you by 1 point there. 1.2 grade average. And you know, I was a brilliant elementary school teacher. I was a elementary school student. I was pretty good in junior high, but in high school, you know, the wheels just fell off. You know, I was told so often that I was not going to amount to much that I started to believe it. And you know, you know, the walkouts was actually a relief because you know, I had an excuse not to go to school, you know, and I knew what we were doing was going to be huge. Didn't know how big it was going to be. I knew it was big, but it wasn't for me because by that time I had already given up. You know, I knew it was going to be for my brothers, you know, my younger brothers, and for you kids, you know. But we, you know, what I want to talk about is, you know, reflections is not so much what we did. Because you can see the movie, you can hear, you know, you can ask us questions about the specifics that day, how we felt, why we did it, and all that. I'm going to tell you how I felt and what gave me the notion that it was going to be okay. It's because I had two loving parents who supported me. I had my mom and my dad. You know, my mom, that poster that's right there, where you see Sal being carried on the shoulders by the Brown Berets after he was told that, you know, he was going to be allowed back into school. That was such a historic moment, which you don't see there. And if you do see the Chicano the Chicano series that was put out by PBS, you'll see the video part of that. You'll see a beautiful woman standing right there with pearls. That was my mom. My mom was very supportive. She was there when we walked out. She was there to greet us, and that's what gave me the courage. My dad wasn't as supportive in that way, but he didn't stop me from doing it. Him, he was, old school, World War II vet. He used the term Chicano, but, he didn't do it in a political way. He just, we're Chicanos, that's what we are. He grew up during the Zoot Suit era, but my dad gave me support in that he did not deny me or say you can't walk out. And you're going to hear some stories about kids who weren't able to go back home after the walkouts. Well, that wasn't me. My family was very proud of what I did. And my dad, he is why I do what I do. I'm a social worker now. I work with teen fathers. I work with teen fathers trying to get them to be responsible men, hombres de palabra, that they keep their word. When, if they give the word, they keep their word. And I try to teach it by giving an example because I learned that from my dad. My dad wasn't an educated man in terms of, formal education. In fact, he dropped out of school in the 9th grade, so that was my legacy. I beat him by 3 years. But my dad, was a solid guy. He taught me how to be a man, how to be a father. But it was my mom that was always involved in the schools. She was the one who was there, PTA. She was there to meet with Mr. Castro and all, whenever I was in trouble. And I got in trouble a lot. You saw me getting a nalgada all the time, getting swatted. That was true. I didn't get swatted for speaking Spanish, though. I didn't really speak Spanish that well. Both my parents were pochos. So, I got swatted for other things like laughing and making jokes in class. I was a payaso in class. And I was always ending up in the principal's office, Mr. Ingalls or Mr. Childress, the vice principal. Well, this one time when I was in the principal's office, my mom would always come. I knew the routine. I knew how to work the system. I get swatted, big deal. Get swatted, they give me a little lecture, I go back to class, and my mom would scold me. She probably, you get the broom on me when I got home. But at least there, I knew no problem. Well, what happened was one time when they called home, when I was there sitting in the principal's office again, was I forgot that my dad's work hours had changed. He wasn't working days anymore, he was working nights. So when the call went home, well, guess who got the call? So I'm sitting there in the principal's office, Mr. Ingalls. I was waiting for my mom. My mom walks in. Right behind me walks my dad. And my dad, I go, oh no. And my dad walks in. And now my dad, only 5'7" with his boots, and maybe 175 fully clothed, but he was a tough guy. He just had that look like, what you do this time? I was like, oh. So he walks in, and Mr. Ingalls, greets my mom, and then my mom goes, well, this is my husband. And Mr. Ingalls looked at my father. He goes, oh, Mr. Verdugo, we thought you were a myth. And my father, with his 9th grade education, goes, I'm not a myth, I'm a mister. Well, I share that story. You don't talk about those kind of things. That's not nothing you're proud of. But I shared that story with Victor Villaseñor, who wrote the original script, who was writing the storyline for the movie Walkout, because I wanted my character to be in the movie. So I figured, make me funny, make me, interesting. Well, Victor looked at me and goes, you must have been mad. I go, no, I was embarrassed. My dad missed. They go, no. Well, your father, he must have been pissed off. I go, well, yeah, he didn't like principals anyway. He didn't like authority, and he didn't like being there. He goes, no, because he knew what the principal was telling you. He knew what the principal was telling him at that moment. What Mr. Ingalls and what society and what that school and everybody was saying is that fathers are a myth. Latino fathers are a myth. They're not supposed to be in school taking care of their kids. They're never around. They're not involved in their kids' lives. That's why I dedicate myself to the work that I do, because I need to show that we are involved. Fathers, Latino men are involved in their kids' lives. We get sidetracked a little, even those teen fathers that sometimes don't take the responsibility that they're supposed to take up. Many times it's because nobody taught them. There was no father in their life to teach them how to take responsibility. I was lucky. I had my father, and I had that man over there who taught me how to be a man, how to take care of myself and take care of my family. And if it wasn't for Sal, even though I dropped out, I was able to go to UCLA the following fall. And, you know, I owe it all to him because he had faith in me. He told me, you know, you can go to school. I go, I don't have a diploma, Sal. He goes, it doesn't matter. We'll get you into a special program. There's special admissions and all this stuff. And I got in. Sorry I didn't graduate, Sal, but I finally did maybe 30 years later, 1994. But, you know, I did graduate. But, and so I know I'm taking more than my 10 minutes, but I just want to say that in the movie, like I said, we were cute and all this other stuff. And, you know, maybe we were a little bit cute when we were back then. But one of the things that was true about the movie was that I had a real beautiful girlfriend at that time in the movie. You saw in the movie there was Bobby and there was Yoli. Well, she's not my girlfriend anymore. She's my wife, Yoli. We've been together since 1968. So, thank you.
We're going to turn now to Mita Cuaron. She was a student at Garfield High School at the time of the walkouts. She later received her nursing credential and is now a mental health counselor for the County of Los Angeles. Mita.
Good afternoon. It's quite an honor being here. As I was listening to Mario speak, I was going over briefly what you see here are court transcripts of my father's trial. Back in 68, he was accused of disrupting the peaceful existence of the school and getting in the way of his daughter's education and the other students, and he was in fact responsible for keeping out of school. And wasn't he concerned that his daughter was not receiving an education, quote unquote? A year later, he would be persecuted, and he was put in jail, the county jail, for 2 weeks. And that's his valor of honor for me and for the community. Having said this, like Bobby, I grew up in a very progressive family. My father grew up in his young youth during the Zoot Suits riots. He went on to go to Garfield, and at the young age of 16, he dropped out. And a few years later, he joined the Merchant Marines during the Second World War. He and my mother were very supportive. So I did not have the problem of having to go home and explain to parents of why we walked out. They met Sal Castro at the Cleveland House. Harry was in attendance. We were there to hear Sal speak about the conditions of the school, and my father especially knew what the conditions were. The core of our group, known as the Blowout Committee, as Professor Garcia had said that John quoted the committee as the Blowout Committee, came from the student John Ortiz. There were 2 women in that group, myself and another student named Cassandra Zacharias. And of course, Harry Gamboa, who's sitting to my right. During the walkouts, there was, the situation was heightened to the point where what you see behind us, you see a line of the sheriffs who, with their batons, threatened us and actually began hitting students with them. At the time, my father was in Washington, D.C., talking to Congress about the terrible housing conditions and poverty levels of East Los Angeles. But my mother was there at the time, so I wasn't alone. And in that heightened situation of being persecuted, being chased, being struck, being hit, we, as students, we resorted to my home, and unbeknown to myself, a minister by the name of Father John Luce came to the aid of my parents and provided food, clothing, and money, because parents were not allowing the students to return home. They were homeless for a period of around 2 weeks. And so my home became a refuge, a sanctuary for students. And not only experiencing the walkout, but experiencing children my age not being able to go home. It was another experience for me to see and visualize the hearts of parents and the hearts of this this minister. As students in Garfield, we had gone to a St. Alfonso's Church on Atlantic as the cops were chasing us and it was raining. And the priest opened the door and he said, I'm not going to let you in, you shall get what you deserve. That was, quote unquote, another authority figure, the church, not listening to our voices. And in that 2-week period, my father had received a phone call from Superintendent, correct me, Sal, Mr. Spengel? Stengel. Telling my father that if he was to step foot with any parents and any student at Garfield High School the next day for our proposed meeting that Dr. Nava had arranged for us, that he would be arrested. Again, the authority. The system was coming down hard on us. To no avail. The next day, we met, my father and I, my aunt, Cassandra Zacharias, Harry was there, the students John and Ken Ortiz, and several others began to proceed, to go up to the principal's office and to ask, why was this meeting canceled? Well, my father was referenced as Buster. You are to leave this office immediately or we are going to arrest you. Unlike Bobby's situation, my father said to him, I am Mr. Cuaron to you. And if you need to arrest us, then this is your call. The sheriffs came, they handcuffed us, my aunt, myself, another student, and my father. They dragged me, they dragged all of us, they removed our shoes, and the only defense I had was my voice. And believe me, I screamed all the way down until they put us in the car. I was jailed for around 8 hours. They wouldn't even put me in the same cell with my aunt. We would hold hands like this. We were released that evening, and I was suspended for another 2 weeks. So I was out of school for maybe a month. And when I returned, we had to meet with Mr. Murphy again, the three of us. You could imagine what that meeting was like. I returned to school. Every teacher but one, Mr. Turnco, who was Mexican, in front of my classmates said to me, "You should be ashamed of yourself. You are un-American. You have no rights. You don't know anything. All you did was disrupt the school because you're lazy, you don't want to learn. And no matter what you do in my class, I am going to fail you." Well, he did. I too was a dropout, but I went to nursing school, finished, went back to college to get another nursing degree. And in the process, I had to go to night school to get my diploma to finish up that history course so I can get my GED. Was this worth it? You bet. You bet. Till this day, every time I pack my car and take my nursing supplies and medical supplies to go up to Campus Kramer, it rejuvenizes me, but when I see the faces of the kids that attend this conference that should be with thousands and thousands of youth, but because of funding, we can only accept a limited number amount. I have been doing this since the late 80s, and I will continue to do it. And the movie, I hope after this, there'll be other movies. Because, as Harry remembers, our stories, there's so many stories that were left behind that have not been told. And I hope one day that I can write a novel and write my story of what happened. And I'm very proud. I had to call in sick today to be here. And the struggle continues because the conditions today have worsened. And so it's an honor to speak in front of you, and you stand tall with your heads up and know that what we did was for future generations. And I just marvel at seeing all of you. Because of the fruits of our struggle, you have the fruit that will ripen to reach your dreams, and for the others who've yet to be born. Thank you.
We'll now turn to, thank you, Mita, Harry Gamboa. Harry Gamboa was also a student at Garfield High School. He was a co-founder of ASCO, the East LA Conceptual Performance Art Group. His artistic work has been exhibited nationally and internationally. He has taught at a number of universities, including UCSB, and his writings have been published in a volume entitled Urban Exile, Collected Writings of Harry Gamboa, edited by John Noriega. Harry?
Thank you. Every once in a while I kind of think about when people talk about the walkout, it seems like it's in isolation. And what's sitting before you here are, we are children of the atomic age. We were the first children to be born after the use of the nuclear bomb. I was born in 1951, which is also at the beginning of the atomic testing in Nevada. And so growing up in Los Angeles, where Santa Ana winds blow in from Nevada, my schoolmates throughout our formative years were being sprinkled with nuclear radiation, which is why I attended so many funerals at the age of 11 and 12 for all my friends who died of leukemia, at which time also we were introduced to the specter of possibly going to war. In fact, in junior high school, which is now called middle school, they would allow military personnel to come in and segregate the boys, herd us all into the gym, and provide us with bits of whiskey, cigarettes, and pornography, teaching us how to pick up on girls, get them pregnant, because we weren't going to be around long enough to raise any. We might as well leave something behind, something that contradicts what Bobby's all about, actually, in terms of the program. Also, the generation we come from was the first television generation. And by having the first television generation, we had access to sort of the cultural norms and sort of the same kind of product that was being presented nationally, which meant that what was on television actually superseded the kind of limited and restrictive kind of education that was being provided to us in public school. And so quite often, things that I would see, even in my elementary school books, seemed ludicrous and stupid to me, in which I, at the very early age, would contradict, argue with, become very rebellious. I would mock school. In fact, I was given a third grade a math book, I recall, from a teacher I possibly hated at the time. And I had had many friends, and I said, well, listen, this is the only math I need to know. I threw the math book down and kicked it all over East LA, and with every kick, a page would fly out. I kept count, and in the end, I formulated an equation, and I realized how many times I got to kick a book to bring it back to school with only 3 pages. By the time the walkouts came about, many of the things that had been proclaimed in school seemed to be absolutely vindictive against the Chicano population, because we are also of the generation of the civil rights movement, which meant that we grew up prior to the civil rights movement, in which there were blatant, literal blatant signs of racism abounded everywhere, both in text, in verbalization. Bobby mentioned he was actually hit in school. I mean, schools were very much carried out like prison establishments, where violence was condoned and dished out to young people. So there were many people that were had suffered sort of brutality and actually very negative kind of propaganda. And also being brainwashed to join the military. In fact, when I see pictures of the walkouts, one of the things that's not mentioned is that many of these young boys that are walking out within a few short years were dead in Vietnam. And if you look at the yearbooks of the high schools, they are actually Book of the Dead. And so many of our friends have been gone for 40 years. And so just as many probably today high school students will talk about their friends are also going to be dead in 40 years as a result of the war that's going on now. During the walkouts, I'd have to say that one of the things that the Garfield group, which was hinted at, that we kind of preceded that, is that there might have been sort of a philosophical difference maybe with the rest of the group, and I guess it had to be with the introduction of Ralph Guadon's kind of earlier connections, and I think we had been maybe introduced a little bit more to a leftist leaning kind of orientation, and not only that, I think amongst the group that we had, because John Ortiz, who's constantly referred to, was part of my initial study group. He stole the big dictionary out of the library. And in the 7th grade, we decided to read it. And we started in A, and by the time we reached the 9th grade, we had finished the Z and knew how to use it, and used it very well to do a number of things. And the big thing was to convince as many young people as we could not to go to war, and to go against the war, and to fight for our rights, and to speak out. And fortunately, I got a chance to meet a handful of people, and actually, as a result of the walkouts, got to meet people from other schools in which we all basically served as a focal point of promoting social awareness and fighting for our rights. And to this very day, we continue to do that in our own distinct style. And hopefully all of you will also continue with your studies to promote sort of an understanding of the fact that all people should be treated with human rights, and everyone's born with an innate dignity that cannot be violated, should not be violated, and we will not allow it to be violated. And so I applaud all of you for all your work.
I'm going to shift the lineup just a little bit. I want to go to Vicki Castro now. Vicki Castro was also a college student at the time of the blowouts. She was attending what was called LA State, is now Cal State LA. She received an MA also later from Pepperdine University, and she served from 1993 to 2000. Well, she went on to become a school teacher as well, but she served on the LA Board of Education from 1993 to 2000, which is remarkable because she's one of the students who helped to attack the Board of Education in the walkouts. Some years later, she's actually on the Board of Education in terms of trying to continue to make the changes that the kids walked out in 1968. Vicki.
Thank you. First of all, I'm also honored to be here with the panel, and I just need to tell you, every time I'm in Sal's presence, it's like so inspiring, and always honored to be in his presence because he did affect our lives in many, many ways. I came from a little bit different background. I did attend the first Mexican American Youth Leadership Conference in at Hess Kramer, and my perspective was very, very different. I had attended schools on the east side, Euclid, Hollenbeck, and Roosevelt, and we were the majority. Mexicans were the majority, so I had no concept of what it meant to be a minority in the United States from my world. And the other, I had been a very, very good student. I came from very, very strict parents. I did what was asked of me. I was respectful. I knew at an early age you go through school and you can play around and be payaso, but under the radar screen. No calls home. My parents were not involved in my education. It was on trust and honor, and you know that education was going to get you a better life. And especially from their perspective, my father went, I believe, to the 7th grade and my mother the 4th grade. So it was education, education, education. Well, I had an enlightening senior year, not only attending the conference. As I said, I was a fairly good student. I had a brother at Dartmouth, and I had a brother at Antioch at my senior year. And I went to see my high school counselor that guided you through on to college, and being from a very strict home. I had a very Mexicano father. You know, you're not going to leave the house until you're married. And so I had figured out that I was going to go to a Catholic college school, and I was going to go in San Francisco to Mills College. That would be the only way he would let me leave the house. But when I went to my counselor, it was one of those very stories that is repeated. Well, I don't think you're ready for a four-year college yet. You go to a community college at that time, a junior college or whatever they call it. And if you do well, then maybe you could transfer to a four-year college. I was so devastated that I could not go home with that. And I could not tell my brothers, who had sort of prepped me that I was the next one to go on to a four-year university. So my best friend and I, we made it on over to LA State, and we got our application and we applied. And that's bitterness, though, stayed with me about being excellent in high school and not being good enough. So just about that time, there was a second conference, and there was a third, and I went back as a peer college advisor to the Hess Kramer camps. And before I knew it, we had an organization called Young Citizens for Community Action that became Young Chicanos for Community Action, which became the Brown Berets. And so being very active with that group, we were very involved at Father Luce's church. And I still was not that serious of an activist yet. Really, when I had gone to Hess Kramer, I was all excited about all the boys from the other schools. You know, I got my first boyfriend out of Hess Kramer. You know, I think not quite my first kiss, but my first boyfriend. And so I was sort of still in that little social mood. But I also, as I said, at Hess Kramer, I learned I had a voice and that I could speak up because I wasn't in that kind of a family atmosphere. I followed the rules. And second, that I was a minority, and that when I got to Cal State LA, I could count the number of other Chicano students on my hand. I remember walking up that long pathway, and then you'd check each other out, like, are you really a Mexican, or you know, whatever. There were so very few of us. So I knew that I was in an unjust world. And through Hess Kramer and through those organizations, we started to organize, and we had, you know, goals, and a lot of it was on police brutality. But I do recall one time a speaker coming to address us and tell us about this concept of a walkout and the educational needs. And it was Sal Castro, and he had in his hand a Time magazine that had written about East LA, and I remember him saying and quoting it about the odor of the streets of wine. And I'm like, what the hell is Time magazine? I was still reading Teen magazine, you know. So, you know, that once again enlarged my world. Now I was introduced to a national magazine that had this concept of my community. So we continue, and I played different organizing roles under the group of Young Chicanos for Community Action. We were very, very, very fortunate. And to have Cesar Chavez as a mentor in organizing skills. And there's only one thing that he asked us to do that to this day I haven't done it, and that's to give up my car. Because he says, then you're forced to go with someone else in carpool, and as you do, you're organizing. So I had practiced a lot of those skills, but I still can't give up that car. But, you know, so we had been very trained in organization, and so working not only with the high school students via Sal's contact mostly, I was still at college, so we were in UMass and Mecha, and I like to say that, you know, I always sometimes feel like a historic figure, because I was like at the first Mexican American Youth Leadership Conference. I was in the first UMass. I was at the conference when it turned into Mecha, and so I start to say, God, you're very, very old, Vicki, and you're saying a lot. But it was always, you know, a calling that out of that high school experience that drove me. And I was very, very lucky to have had very wise and very informed mentors as Sal and Cesar Chavez and Father Luz, and even the people that we hung around with, you know, David Sanchez and Paula and Rachel Ochoa and everything, and you know, being part of that Piranha, we did talk a lot. But we also had a lot of fun. There's one thing about going through the Chicano movement, is that you also did it with a lot of humor, because we're so out of place sometimes. And I remember then when we were going to speak in front of, whether it was a parent group or a civic group or a government group, one of our advisor was then Richard Alatorre, who became a very prominent elected official in the state of California. But he was so wise, and he would set us up by our stereotypes. I need a militant face. You go talk David Sanchez. I need a sweet little face. Come here, Vicki. And so I learned to slide once again underneath that radar system. And but what all of the opportunities that I had to be active in, some were very important in changing things, and some were downright stupid. Like we stopped the the freeway on the San Bernardino freeway. I don't know what we were protesting at the time, but we just all dodged out there on the freeway. And we stopped traffic in both directions. To this day, I go. And then I don't know, a few of us were at Father Luce's church when we were handling police brutality cases. Thank heaven this was pre-SWAT teams. But we decided that night to also keep then Police Chief Reardon hostage until he heard all our demands. To this day, I say, thank God I'm alive. But, but some of those things you did out of your beliefs in justice struggles, your belief on what you had been taught that this nation stood for, and so you just did them because they were sound beliefs. I share these words now. I'm retired. I'm struggling with a 10-year-old and a 9-year-old that are always, 2 grandsons that are always in trouble in school. I've served in every capacity there is as an educator, school board member to principal, and you still can't tell a 9 and 10-year-old what to do. Just do it. But either way, I share this because I also, along my life, learned a quote that has always stayed with me, and that is, you are the other me and I'm the other you. And I hope that our presence here motivates you. Thank you.
We'll now turn to Henry Gutierrez, Professor Henry Gutierrez. At the time of the blowouts, he was a student at Occidental College, and then he later received his PhD at UC Irvine, and he has taught now for many years at San Jose State University. Henry.
Thank you. And thank you for having me here this afternoon. I appreciate the opportunity to come and talk about the walkouts and the events back then. And I'm going to start by just clarifying that, I was a student at the time. I was a sophomore at Occidental College. And by the nature of the school, there wasn't really much in the way of a Chicano student organization there. I really felt like I was the only one on the campus. It took the walkouts later to kind of realize that there was really a handful of us. But because of that, it meant that I continued to have relations with, people I knew in high school that graduated from Garfield. I graduated from Garfield in '66. And so I continued to have, connections with them who had gone on to Cal State LA or to East LA College, and became aware that, in fact, these walkouts were being planned and that people were talking about these, and that the college students were beginning to organize to support or not to support, because as I recall at East LA College, there wasn't a unanimous feeling among the MASA students. It was Mexican American Student Association, the precursor to UMAS. They hadn't yet changed their name, but there wasn't unanimity there among that group that, in fact, the walkouts were a good idea. And so there was debate about that, and I think Mario Barrera is right that, for every action there's a reaction. There was reaction in our community to the walkouts, and a negative reaction. And so it wasn't unanimous among even the college students there, that, at least at East LA College, that this was a good idea. I had a different perspective, however, and I kind of wondered to myself, what was it that allowed me to be receptive to the idea, that made me immediately think to myself, yes, this is a good idea, yes, we need to do this, yes, we need to support it. And I guess I have to look back to my own experience at Garfield or Stevenson Junior High School before that, or Rowan Avenue Elementary School. I was a product of the public schools of East LA. But I was aware, even as a student at Garfield in '66 or '65, '64, that our schools were not equal to the schools that other students got. And it came to me really from my experience of attending, I guess what we would call at that time, they were like honors classes. You got to go to summer school to another school in another part of the city with other students from other schools that you didn't know. And I guess kind of the precursor to, or maybe like the AP kind of class. So it gave me a chance to see other schools in the Los Angeles School District, and gave me a real experience to say, the school I know, the school that I attend, is not like the schools that exist in other parts of the city. that are better, that have more facilities, or in meeting other students who came from other schools to see what they were studying, what they knew, what they had been doing. And again, to think to myself, gee, they're doing a lot more than what we do in our school, where they're more advanced in their studies. They challenge them more in their school. So for me to realize that, there's something wrong with our school, I was already an awareness that I had as a student at Garfield in '65 and '66, and could see it there in our school in the repressive atmosphere that was the norm at our school. The disregard for Chicano students, the swatting, the corporal punishment that was a regular feature of our schools, the kind of police atmosphere of mistrust towards students at our school. I remember our vice principal, I don't remember what the issue was, but set up a program of basically searching every young woman's purse to enter the cafeteria. This was the kind of repressive action. Now, of course, today maybe we all think like, well, what's the big deal? I get searched every time I go to the airport. But to some of us, it's a big deal. And for me, back in 1965, it was an insult that this should happen to students at our school. And I spoke out against that as a student there at the school. And so I was aware of that kind of atmosphere in the school. And maybe that's what led me to be so supportive and ready to agree that something had to be done. So when the walkout occurred at Garfield, I happened to be at East LA College in one of those meetings where we're trying to decide should we or shouldn't we support this, and word comes in that they've walked out of Garfield. So to me, as I immediately go down there to be with the students, this is the school I had attended, graduated from not very long before. And when I got there, students were all over the front of the school, out in the street in front of the school. I went up to the administration. Some of the teachers that I knew, Mr. Turco, I remember him, what a conservative man he was. And others like Mr. Cap, who was, the driver education teacher, probably rings some bells with some of the Garfield students.
Almost rang my name.
Yeah, that kind of, those kind of folks that I had an encounter with there as I tried to kind of defend what students were doing, articulate the concerns that students had, raise some of the issues that were prominent in our schools, and the kind of, angry reactions that they gave back. But nevertheless, as I said, that kind of, my impetus to be there to support the students and to agree with the necessity of that kind of action. The students, in a way, set off something much larger than the walkouts, and that's been acknowledged here already. And I got involved in that after the walkout. So the Educational Issues Coordinating Committee was a group that formed after the walkouts. It was a call, really, to people of all walks of life in the community to act together, to support the students, and to bring a call for the necessity of reforming our schools and bringing basic kind of rights to our students. And I began attending their meetings, and we used to meet on a weekly basis and met through 1968 into 1969 and really into 1970. And so through that activity, I had a chance to kind of, to take up the work of that committee, which committed itself to basically following through with the school board to see that the demands of the students were in fact addressed in a serious manner and not just kind of put aside. We saw already that the school board, didn't want to come to Lincoln to meet with the students, didn't want to hear the demands presented to them. And even after all that happened, they still continually would backpedal and try to bury those demands in a whole set of committees that the school board had, so that there was interminable discussion about all of those issues. But nevertheless, we committed ourselves to that process to try to bring about the addressing of those issues. And I'll just mention a couple of things that were prominent in the period immediately when I became involved. One was the racist letter from a teacher at Lincoln High School, Mr. Davis, who responded to one of the teachers supporting the students there, and responded in the most racist terms that you can imagine. And in fact, maybe I'll bore you a little bit to read you just a little bit. Most of the Mexican Americans have never had it so good. Before the Spanish came, he was an Indian grubbing in the soil. And after the Spaniards came, he was a slave. It seems to me that America must be a very desirable place. Witness the number of wetbacks and migrants, both legal and illegal, from Mexico. Yes, I agree that he sees himself as a passive object. Therein lies the whole problem, as well as the answer when it comes to going to school free and the best in the world. He's passive. Absenteeism is his culture, his way of life. Always mañana, maybe we'll get an education. Mañana when it comes to preparing his home, controlling childbirth, planning for tomorrow, he is passive, et cetera, et cetera. This was a common kind of attitude that teachers held, and what was remarkable is they felt no compunction in openly expressing these ideas, having them published. Well, the EICC took his letter and turned it into a flyer that we sent out and distributed widely as we could, and hounded that teacher and the school district to take our demand that these are the kind of teachers that need to be removed from our schools. And we weren't successful in getting him removed completely. We got him moved out of Lincoln. He went someplace else to calm the community. But it was just one of those kind of incidents where, you know, this kind of attitude became so prominent. We took on the issue of corporal punishment, a major issue in our schools, where again it was a common. I was swatted myself. I mean, I don't think I was a bad student, you know, but it was just such a common practice that you could be swatted for the most minor infractions in your school, and it happened. And so again, you know, the EICC, and I don't think I brought a copy of that one. We made, again, a flyer. It had the Board of Education code that governed corporal punishment. It made very clear on that flyer that corporal punishment could only be administered in certain conditions. That is, it had to be in the witness of another adult. So your teacher couldn't just take you in the classroom and just swat you right there, the way it happened to us. That was against the rules. And so we put out a flyer and again distribute this to students at school. We'd go out as the EICC members, go out to the schools and be there in the morning handing out these flyers to inform students about their rights. And so they could use that flyer to say to teachers or say to administrators, look, here's what the code says, this is how it has to happen if you're going to do it. So we engaged in those kinds of actions. We had a grievance committee. So again, students had problems with their school, they'd come to our meetings. We had weekly meetings or open meetings to anybody in the community. Come to the meeting, somebody would get up and tell their story about what happened at their school, the problem that happened, the injustice they felt they had experienced. We'd gather a committee from those present, okay, the chair of our grievance committee, the volunteers from the audience. We'd go down to the school with that parent and their child. We'd go to try to settle that issue, to bring the pressure onto that campus to change the situation. So the grievance committee was another feature of the activities that we did. These kind of activities, in a way, took a different form in that summer of 1968 when the 13 folks were indicted and charged with disrupting the schools. And later in the fall, when we learned that Sal Castro would not go back to his school, and this became a huge issue for our committee. And so we began a campaign, and I did bring a flyer, you know, that we had here at the time, Return Sal Castro to Lincoln. We had our reason. He speaks the truth about the school. He helped the students channel their frustration into peaceful protest. He's a symbol of success through education for hundreds of youth. He acted in good faith to create a better Lincoln. He's a teacher that says to our youth, it's good to be Mexican American, and because there's no law that says he should not be back. So we put a big campaign to get Sal Castro back in school, and at the ideas that are mentioned here, that we were trying to show a message. Davis, on the one hand, this is not what we want. Castro, on the other hand, this is what our schools need, to send that message to the school board and to the public at large, to get him back at school. Because at that time, it was kind of just a matter of routine. Well, you're charged with a felony, okay, you've got to go. And again, let's think about that felony. Disrupting the school is a misdemeanor. But the district attorney decides, oh, these folks conspired to commit that misdemeanor. That makes it a felony. So for that reason, the school board says, well, Sal Castro's got to go out of the classroom. They're kind of local policy. So the opening of school in the fall of '68 at Lincoln High School, we were there to protest and picket outside that school. We did it on a daily basis. I forget how long we were there. It was a week, 2 weeks. Every day, picketing in front of Lincoln High School to bring Sal Castro back to Lincoln. Every Tuesday, Thursday, the school board meet. We'd go down to the school board and say, are you ready to bring Sal Castro back? No, we're not. Okay, we're back to Lincoln. One day, we're at the school board and we say, are you going to bring Sal Castro back? Say, no, we're not. Okay, we're going to stay here until you bring him back. So there's the sit-in at the school board, the Los Angeles Board of Education. We were there again another 11 days, sleeping, eating in that school board room until Sal Castro was finally brought back. And you know, I guess I want to say a little, because there's limited time. The amount of community support for that sit-in was amazing. You know, as someone who was there for the majority of the time, I mean, I can tell you, people sent us food, people sent us blankets, people sent us a mariachi to serenade us. Father Luz came and gave mass in the school board meeting room for us. I mean, that community support and our own sense of euphoria that we were making a change, that together we had all this support, that things were really going to change, was part of that movement, part of that feeling that we were going to change things. Things were different now and wouldn't be the same again. Was just a tremendous feeling that came out of that event and the walkouts. And you know, for me, I guess, you know, it was a turning point. I mean, I've been involved in education since. So we took up, after the Sal Castro issue, we took up the reading problem. We took up the textbook issue and the portrayal of Mexican Americans in the textbooks. You know, the commission was appointed by the school board. Again, the EICC pushed that on the school board. Appoint yourself an official body to advise you and help the schools respond to the needs of Mexican American students. So it widened into a lot of other activities, and I guess, you know, I hope have made some impression on conditions. You know, 40 years later, I guess I really have to ask myself, gee, you know, things haven't changed that much. I mean, I could go back probably, I'm sure, and pick out a failing school in 1968, because we made a scattergram for our reading campaign. We'd have minority percentage on one side, percentiles on the other, so you could show in a scattergram the segregation and the distinct kind of education. So minority schools are all grouped down at the bottom percentiles, the mostly white schools are all grouped at the top. We could visually show that. I'm sure I could go and pick on one of those dots that was at the bottom in 1968 and today would still be at the bottom today, 40 years later. I'm sure that could be done. So I have to ask myself, what is it that, you know, why didn't this work? What happened? Why didn't we have really greater impact that we really thought we were going to have at that moment? And I don't know if I really know the answer. I mean, I think about it, but I think part of it is that in some ways we were really kind of naive. You know, we kind of thought, and I think we said it at some points, that, you know, the schools want to do better, and they just don't know how. See, if we teach teachers how to be more sensitive to Mexican American students, I spent a lot of time doing that through a community-based organization. If we teach teachers how to be better informed about Mexican American students, they'll do a better job. If we get the right portrayal in the textbooks, then this will make a difference. If we can desegregate our schools, and that was an issue during the 70s, you know, this might make a difference. We kind of believed that the schools wanted us to succeed, and it was only their lack of ability, lack of experience, a lack of role models that prevented them from doing it. I really think now that was naive. I really think now that the schools are part of the oppressive process, and that it was no mistake that we were failing in such large numbers, and that in fact we needed a much broader, and I think Mario Barrera's point, we need a much broader change in society for us to achieve equality in education. That when there's not equality in society, then there isn't equality in their schools. So that our struggle, in a way, to me, has pushed us forward, raised consciousness, brought a new awareness of our own identity and pride in our identity that did distinguish our movement from earlier movements. And again, I have to say, in '68, I was ignorant of that. You know, later I realized, well, wait a minute, there was LULAC, there was a Congreso, there was all these other organizations that were pushing the same things we were, that only, again, just gave further credence to the idea, well, why haven't we had more impact? And if all this has been happening now for generations. And as I say, I think part of it has to do, well, we just have not achieved a broader equality in society that would then be mirrored in our schools. We were kind of naive in thinking that the schools could somehow change society, rather than the schools are really just a mirror of what society has to offer. So I think our struggle, you know, in that way continues, but I think we begin to see now how what we did is part of a much broader movement to achieve a much broader kind of change in society that can eventually bring about the kind of conditions in schools that we hope to see back in 1968. Thanks a lot for letting me be here.
We'll conclude our panel now, and we hope to have some opportunity for some questions and answers for the panel. But we'll now conclude the panel with Yoli Rios, who was also a student at Lincoln High School at the time of the walkouts. She then went on to UCLA, and for a number of years she's been involved in educational and community activities. So Yoli.
Thank you. I'm so honored every time since the movie came out, we've had opportunity to speak and share our experiences as high school students. I think one element that, in terms of what all the panels say, are we going to do this, are we going to be involved? I was fortunate enough to, in terms of my father, he had some, the ability to become involved in some very progressive social movements. He was Yoli Rios, and he did this one film called The Ring, where there's a picture in the movie where he's portrayed with Rita Moreno and their boyfriend and girlfriend, and they're going to a skating rink, and the sign on the rink is, no Mexicans. It's Mexican night, Wednesday night or something, so they get turned away, And I think the movies that he did after that, The Lawless, were all socially significant. Joseph Losley was one of the producers and directors, so he was portrayed in these kind of social justice, equality movies, and that was my orientation, So I was, like the panel, supportive parents, progressive parents, who, as I went on, into Lincoln High School, even as a young woman, a Latina, Chicana, because I was at those times in the high schools, you had tracks, I was going to be in the academic track, because I was a math major and that was going to be my way into college, so on and so forth. So that orientation of what our communities, our Latino communities, the Mexican communities, had always been there with me to question. And I think when, Bobby, who was really, my boyfriend, much more involved getting into the meetings, so on and so forth. My role was part of that is just the networking, like all the panels said, and there was no cell phone, no MySpace, no any. It was the networking. People, representatives would go to the meetings and come back and network, and then it was our role to talk and whatever clubs we were in the school, get the word out, and understand. And I think what was key in that is, because now I'm with the California Nurses Association, a labor organizer, labor rep for the nurses. Part of that is the skills that you acquire there is the one-on-one discussion, understanding of what the issues were. And that was easy to do because as Bobby portrayed in the movie, he was always getting swatted, and it was humiliating. It truly was humiliating, and yet we felt so defenseless. There was no way to protest that. We would take it home to the parents, and it just seems like nothing could be done. It was taken for granted. The blatant racism that we faced every day, the aspects when I share with you as a high school student at Lincoln, academic track, geometry class, Robert Thompson, I say his name out there because we just hated him so, would bring his putter and his, his golf thing, and here's the chapter, do the work, and he would spend that 45, 60 minutes, just putting, learning how to better his golf swing, so on and so forth. And, and he was, that's the kind of blatant racism and lack of regard and denigration that the students faced. So we come, into we had to fight. There was no choice here. We had to. My orientation. When does this total oppression stop? And so you've got to do something. You've got to take on, the ability to challenge the establishment. And I think for the majority, as we networked with students, we said, yeah, this has got to stop. So again, yes, there was the civil rights movement. There was the anti-war movement developing. And for the students, it was like, ya basta. And many of us who were involved, you know, some of the experience as you speak with other high school walkout leaders, you know, were quite challenged, and there were many who I had applied to many private schools, and it turned out that my counselor, you know, Mr. Hatterline, says, well, Yoli, you know, your involvement here, I think the only school that's going to take you is Immaculate Heart College, because those are some radical nuns, and they like that, you know, your involvement. But it was the school administrators and the school's counselors who made it known. I was going to receive some scholarships. I ended up with a $25 scholarship from Sears and Roebuck, you know, so I mean, and we had heard those stories among us and others as we networked, where some of the scholarships were pulled, some of the applications to the better schools, you know, were, you know, not forthcoming after, you know, the involvement. But I think it didn't, for the students, it was, now's the time to say enough. And as young people cruising in Bobby's, you know, little beat up Buick, you know, we saw every day the impact of police brutality, being pulled over, being roughed up. We also, in our networking, I think in the movie that I think that was great that they put this in, is that our orientation as youth, you know, Latino, Chicano youth, what unfolded before us was this whole networking of Interpol and the police and the FBI. And I think we knew that those things existed and were there. And I think as we organized among ourselves, because in the movie it said, oh, everybody's got coming, the CIA, the police, you know, it was true. And there before you, as students, we were talking very fundamentally and knowing that that we saw ourselves as true patriots, that the civil liberties, the dignity and respects are worth any sacrifice, and that it was time now, you know, to take a stand, you know. And I think that kind of orientation that I have as a young person, the family orientation, the involvement, you know, in the walkouts, and those are the things that have been long-lasting, and that I hope that as youth you understand that your civil liberties and dignity and respect are just so basic that you have no choice but to continue the struggle and press on to improve our communities. Thank you.
We're now going to have some time for some questions and answers, but before I do that, I think some of our high school students have arrived. If they can raise their hands, the high school students who are here with us, you guys who came in, let's give them a big hand and over there as well.
I was wondering, compared to, say, the activities you participated in the 60s, what's your opinion of, say, the effectiveness or the organization of more recent protests concerning similar topics?
Who wants to read Mita? You want to?
Most recent
Yeah.
protest?
They mentioned.
Well, you know, 2 years ago, there was a outpouring of students that took place in Los Angeles on the eve before and after the marches of the immigration movement. And the student sentiment then equaled or surpassed and expressed the frustration and inequality and disparity that exists today in the very same high schools that we attended. I met with those students in City Hall whose parents were keeping them home for fear that the ICE authorities were going to raid and take them back to their countries of origin. So, you know, the problem still exists.
Anybody else in the panel want to address that?
One of the things that I was that I took notice of when in 2006, when the millions of students across the country took to the streets was that it was in many ways more sophisticated in terms of more universal outlook. I mean, in terms of what the students are going through. I mean, when we walked out, there were real specific issues. You know, swatting, the lack of history taught in the schools. You know, just the racism. I mean, which are big topics, but very specific. And this one was more broader because it really involved, you know, like humanity. And I was talking about, you know, taking issues of immigration, you know, something that was more universal, that was more widespread. I was really impressed with that. But just as they try to do to us back in the 60s, the media and their cohorts, you know, their people on CNN were always trying to negate the sincerity and even the knowledge of the students why they walked out. They were always trying to play down, you know, how much, you know, they say they can't even articulate. They put a microphone in front of a student's face, and I walked out, you know, and you know, well, you know, if you're on TV and you know you get a microphone, you're not going to be the most articulate person. I think the articulation came in the bravery that they showed in even taking up these issues. You know, there's many ways to express yourself, and you know, our kids are not told, you know, not taught how to speak for themselves. You know, I mean, nobody is asked what's your opinion. Nobody comes into the classroom and say, how are you feeling today, mijo? You know, what you know, what's going on in your life? What can I do for you? No, it's like, do this, don't do that. So what do you expect the person to say when a microphone is stuck in his face? They're not going to articulate, but they had that passion, and I was so impressed. There were some things that I got kind of scared of when I saw them walking out on the freeway there, Hollywood Boulevard, you know, the Hollywood freeway and things like that. But, you know, the outpouring, it was so amazing. So, and people try to blame it on the movie because they walked out a couple of days after the movie came out. Right. You know what? I talked to students, too. We were there. Yoli and I were out there with the kids and asked them, hey, did you guys see the movie? You know, nobody, who has HBO? You know, these kids don't have HBO. So some of the teachers don't have HBO. You know, they may have heard about the movie, but this was their idea. It was just... It wasn't spontaneous, but it was full of passion. So,
just one more remark about your question. A student from Montebello High, one of the assignments of the teacher who was Latina asked her students in the classroom, your assignment tonight is to go home and ask your parents the name of the coyote that brought them over here.
Bobby, could you say a little bit about, there's going to be a commemorative march this coming Saturday, marking the 40th anniversary of the walkouts from Lincoln High School, I believe, to Hazard Park, which was the route that was taken on that Wednesday walkout. Can you say a little bit about that and where students and others who want to get information about that can go to?
Well, we want to, again, it's such an honor to be here to even talk about what we're talking about, but we want to invite you all to take part and be a part of history yourselves, to commemorate the 40th anniversary. And we targeted March 8th because March 8th was the day that the students from the different high schools actually walked out together from different localities, Garfield, Belmont, Wilson, Lincoln, Wilson, and Roosevelt, and marched to a central location, which was near one of the old Board of Education centers there, which was at Hazard Park, which is located in Los Angeles in Boyle Heights. And to commemorate that, and actually to fulfill a dream that Sal Castro has had for 40 years, and to fulfill a promise that he made to us kids back then. You know, he had said, one day there's going to be a monument put right here in this spot where you kids met from all the schools together. That was unheard of. You're talking about East LA where there's 700 gangs, right? And like nowadays, when do all the schools get together and hug and, in unity? But on that day, March 8th, 1968, we met together. It was such a beautiful sight to see all these thousands of, of kids right there in the park. And on that spot, on March 8th, 2008, in a couple of weeks from now, we're going to witness something and it's going to culminate at the end of a march that we're planning from Lincoln High School to Hazard Park. We're going to walk the route that we took back in 1968. We couldn't do it from all the schools again. That would be a big thing to pull off, but we're going to do it from one school. We're inviting everybody to come out. You know, people talk about the walkouts being a part of the civil rights movement. Well, let's make it a real part of the civil rights movement. You know, the African Americans, and every year have that march from Montgomery to Selma, or I don't know. I'm sorry, you guys are the history majors. I've been out of school too long, but there's marches that commemorate many things that happen in many places, especially in the South. We don't have anything like that, and that was one of Sal's dreams, to do a march to commemorate the walkouts. And when I say fulfill his dream, there's actually going to be a monument unveiled that day. That's going to be, oh God, to honor the kids that walked out that day. And Sal promised us, and he said, "I'm going to do this before I die," and it's going to happen. So we invite you to come out on March 8th. Come on down. If we don't have enough, frijoles, we'll just throw some more water in there and make it stretch. But it will be something that will begin at well, now I forgot. Is it 10 a.m. or 9 a.m.? 10 a.m. at Lincoln High School, and there, it'll be a real special event, and we're gonna hopefully have, and there's gonna be the movie shown at Lincoln High School in the afternoon. So we're trying to get vans and buses to bring people back to Lincoln, because those of us that walked out in '68, our knees aren't as strong as they used to be. So we need some help getting back. But we welcome you, and you can go to MySpace. We have. I'm sorry. For those of you who, and there's been a lot of you from Santa Barbara who have been, those of you who have been contacting. I'm the one that's been answering you, but it's myspace.com/1968 walkouts. And we got pictures and information there on the calendar. And for those of you who don't have MySpace,
Just come on down.
Just come on down. Yeah. Find somebody that does.
I'm going to entertain two brief questions and two brief comments, because we want to have a break before our keynote address by Sal Castro. So let's go over here and then back there.
Okay. I just had a question about the March 8th. If I'm not mistaken, I got an email from the MySpace saying that in order to see the movie after the march, it's a $15 charge, correct? And it said something about going for the Lincoln High Alumni Association and then giving scholarships to students from Lincoln High. That's what the money will go to. Is that correct?
Yeah, that event was not totally. Not connected, because it's all connected, but it is a separate event. We're not sponsoring that. The committee doing the march, Lincoln High School had already planned to show that as a fundraiser. So yeah, it's $15, but I think it's like $7 for students. So there's a discount. But maybe we can do a Woodstock there and knock the fence. No.
Okay,
it is a fundraiser though.
Two brief questions, Tomas and then Marla.
Thank you all very much for all your stories. My name is Tomas Avila Carrasco. I'm a PhD student here in Chicano Studies, and I think it's very, it's amazing what you all did. And I just wanted to, maybe this could go to Harry, I wanted your insight in regards to, you guys are conceptualizing a historical moment in the 60s, right? And there was a lot of progressiveness going on, a lot changing the world. And here we sit today at UCSB in 2008, and throughout we're pretty much getting X'd out of the UC system in regards to our numbers. It's very difficult to get in. And you talk about Mecha, all the organizations. So I just wanted to have you give us our insight on what you think. Like on our campus today, we have Latino and Latina sororities and fraternities. Activism is at a low. The connection to the community is right here. So what, in regards to did you ever think that this was going to happen in regards to the activism, the imagination that y'all had, and then today, that what we're seeing today, with 2.2 million people in jail, the war, and all that. So that was my question.
Harry.
Well, I think one of the things that Yoli didn't, she touched upon was that there was a very active, direct involvement with the FBI, with the military, with the local LAPD, Sheriff's Department, in collusion with the LAUSD, and that is to provide information. There was a whole network of informants. There were undercover agents. In fact, I once came here to look at the Oscar Costa files, and they have his Freedom of Information Act files, and one of the most glaring aspects of it is there are a couple pages of that say, active agents in the Chicano movement, and then there's like 30 or 40 names that are scratched off, and of course, who knows who they were. But these people were very active in destroying people who had imagination. These people were very active in making sure that they either met with accidents or were put front in line and getting drafted and then sent immediately into firefights so that they would die. My name was placed on a Senate subcommittee list of the top 100 subversives in the United States, of which, if you were to go back and take a look at the list of those names, you'd find that very difficult and dangerous things happened to a handful of those people, and it kind of affected people's lives and their opportunities. And so the response is that, and again, moving forward beyond the Chicano walkouts, took place the moratorium, and then more importantly, I think even the moratorium was January 31st, where there was a scene in East Los Angeles where sheriff's deputies opened fire with live ammunition into crowds, very reminiscent of things that were popularized in South Africa, and one of the most extremely violent incidents where police just at random just started killing and shooting at people. And this was a culmination of where things were happening. So this kind of very fearful outcome of what could take place with certain kinds of behavior caused people to go in various different directions and to shy away from that kind of activity. And then with the creation of a mythical, governmental mythical word as Hispanic by Richard Nixon, which then becomes popularized and inculcated into the culture, then drains away sort of the intensity of the term Chicano, which is still a hated term throughout the country, outside of academia and certain neighborhoods. Which is something that's never said, never printed, never utilized, and never reported, and never given equal value. All you have to do is go to the weekend news reports about what people are discussing about the presidential candidates, and you'll never see any opinion by someone who claims to be a Chicano. And the closest you might get to that will be on Spanish language TV, but then again, the English language gets to miss out on that. Kind of value that's there. And of course, Chicanos have great value. And so maybe that's, seeing the people here, I see great value in what's here present.
Okay. Marla, last question, very brief reaction.
My name is Marla Ramirez, and I'm also a grad student, a PhD student in the Chicana Studies department here. And thank you for being here. I just wanted to really thank each and every one of you who made it today and for sharing your stories. I'm also an activist for the pro-immigration movement. And Bobby, you said that you were impressed with our movement, but in reality, you are our teachers. We're learning from you and from watching that film and from watching the newspaper reports and all the activism that all of you were involved in. You're teaching us how to be better activists today. And so I just wanted to thank you, and also, I don't know if your name is Mita? Yes. Mita, thank you for saying, quoting you, that we are your other you, and you are our other us. That was Bobby. Bobby, well. It is very true, and thanks to you, we're able to be activists today and to continue on the fight. Thank you.
And I think maybe with Marla's wonderful comment, did you want, Bobby, very quickly?
Can I just read something real quick?
Yeah,
I want to share just, and I'll do this real quick. I apologize, I should have done it earlier, but after the movie was completed, I wanted to read this at the rap party, but everybody got drunk and they didn't let me read it, so. But it's really dedicated to the young actors who portrayed us, who didn't know anything about the walkouts when they agreed to be in the movie. And it was just some thoughts that I had, and I wrote a little poem, and I borrowed from, if anybody knows who Jose Montoya is, his son, Richard Montoya from Culture Clash. Jose Montoya is a maestro of mine, and I asked him, can I borrow one of your poems? He goes, okay. So it's called I Am Walking, by Bobby Lee Verdugo and Jose Montoya. What happened to the movement, camarada? What happened to la causa and the guns and those vatos de proposals and programas federales? ¿Dónde están? ¿Qué pasó con EOP and education? Weren't we going to build a nation called Aztlán? What became of the berets and revolution y las marchas and all that yelling? ¿De qué sirvió? Where do you suppose they've gone? All those badass bigotones que llegaron shouting raza and viva el barrio, and they couldn't even roll their R's. And what happened to political awareness and all the programs that we started in the barrio, taken over by those nice republicanos, los que hacían malas caras when we used the word chicanos? What happened? ¿Qué pasó? Well, let me take you back 40 years ago, pretty close to this date, the 6th of March in the year of our Lord, 1968. I am walking. No, not that vato that was lost to the world of confusion. No, I am walking out, not realizing I am starting a revolution. 9:52 a.m. and we're watching the clock. 8 more minutes. Are we really going to walk? Paula's looking at Yoli. Yoli's looking at me. Is this the way those college kids did it up at Berkeley? But we're only kids, still in our teens. My mom will kill me if I get blood on my new blue jeans. And what if the cops are waiting in front of the school? Or what if Ingalls is there with that vice principal fool? The clock is moving oh so slow. And what happens if the berets and UMAS don't show? It's 9:54 and the kids are whispering. The teachers are watching us. They stop their boring lecturing. They say that Chicanos have their own schedules. They call it Chicano Standard Time. But on this cloudy morning, we walked out 5 minutes early, caught the officials off guard and blind. Even Sal Castro was surprised when we blew out at 9:55. He told all the critics and doubters this wasn't just a bunch of jive. It must have brought tears to his eyes, watching these thousands of little hermanas and hermanos, because I remember hearing him tell us later, it was a beautiful day to be Chicanos. Sal wanted me up front, leading the charge and saying something profound. My place was to protect Yoli and my brothers. I was more comfortable in the background. But it didn't matter, though. There were hundreds of heroes that week. Paula, Harry, Mita, Tanya, John Ortiz, Yoli, and more. Mocte, Vicki, Mangas, Carlos for sure. But don't forget Freddy Resendez, Frank Carrillo, Robert Rodriguez, Steve Salas, Woozer Perez, Halfman Gonzalez, and John Pareda too. And those who are no longer with us, but their spirits are still celebrating with us. Let's remember Albert Raymond Robles of Roosevelt and Leonard Gomez of Lincoln. Because if you ask, what has happened to the movement, camarada? Take a look around, brothers and sisters. It shall endure. It will endure. It has endured. Viva la raza.
I want to thank this wonderful panel for being with us, and we're going to take a 5-minute break and then come back for our keynote address by Sal Castro. So take a break, stretch out. There may be still some refreshments over there, and we'll reassemble in 5 minutes.